Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, translations and purports by Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 8th chapter, text number 39? 39. Deva Devam Samagan Anti Turyasa Hatevaha Satriyoga Vivaitasmin Esha Dharma Sanatanaha Devam Svam Bhagavanti Devam Svam Bhagavanarhanti Yaya Sahitva Yaya Sahitava Satrayoga Vivatasmin Dharma Sanatanaha Devasvam Bhagavanarhatin Yaya Sahitava Satrayoga Vivatasmin Dharma Sanatanaha
Devasvam Bhagavanti
from drinking the nectar without sharing it. In this way, disagreement and trouble arose as they forbade one another to drink the nectar. Translation, word for word. I guess we will the translation word for word. Some of the demigods said, quote, all the demigods have taken part in churning the ocean of milk. Now, as everyone has an equal right to partake in any public sacrifice, according to the eternal religious system, It is befitting that the demigods now have a share of the nectar. The demigods now have a share of the nectar. O king, in this way, the weaker demons forbade the stronger demons to take the nectar. Purport by, translation again by Srila Prabhupada. Some of the demons said, "All the demigods can take part in turning the ocean of milk. Now, as everyone has an equal right to partake in any public sacrifice, according to the eternal religious system, it is befitting that the demigods now have a share of the nectar. O king, in this way, the weaker demons forbade the stronger demons to take the nectar." Mukam karoti vachalam bhangam kripataram vande Shri Guru Dinatami. I'm going to try to finish this chapter today, so we'll read some more verses at the end of this. And I think we're going to have some video to show you some slides. Anyway, that's a sculpture in the airport, in one of the airports. So it'll probably be about 20 minutes or so. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that the weaker demons were advocating that the demigods should take the nectar because they probably weren't going to get their share. And there's a verse in Bhagavatam, I think it starts out as Sahasranami, and ends in Jivasa Jivatam. It means that the weaker are always exploited by the stronger, and that's the nature of the world at large. The world at large is the stronger taking advantage of the weaker, and we can see this in our everyday experience, that the weaker are always being taken advantage of by the stronger. Of course, devotees try not to be part of that system because not taking advantage of anyone, even animals, and we have a great affection for, especially the cows, Govardhana, and we don't take advantage of them, even though they're not as maybe as astute as we are. They have a very special love for human beings, it seems. And it's also, Prabhupada also mentions that, you can just, turn this on by tapping the top. The weaker's digest naturally pleaded on behalf of the demigods to stop the stronger demons from drinking the nectar without sharing it. In this way, disagreement and trouble arose as they forbade one another, as they forbade one another to drink the nectar. So there's even quarrels amongst people who are ordinarily friends. And I think the story is narrated, it's either in the Bhagavatam or in a lecture of both, lecture by Prabhupada. There was an instance where an uninvited guest turned up at somebody's home, and that guest or those guests had to be served, and the host didn't really know what to do exactly. They were kind of bewildered, so they chose one of their female members to serve the guests. And she had these kind of, in India they call them bangles or bracelets or whatever, but they're usually made out of metal. They were clanging together. And she was thinking that this clanging together was going to disturb the guests, and it kind of disturbed everybody because it was making a very loud sound. So this story was given to illustrate that sometimes things that are ordinarily not bothersome can cause people to become agitated, and it was the bang of these bangles. It also showed, it was given in a section that talks about how quarrels can arise almost spontaneously, and it seems like kind of an innocent thing that a person was serving and that the bracelets were banging together. But that's the nature of the material world. Another example that was given was that sometimes bamboo trees, it doesn't happen around here so much, but I think in tropical parts of the world, there were forest fires, and forest fires existed even in ancient times. And sometimes they were started by the wind causing the bamboo trees, which were very heavy pieces of wood, to rub against each other and create friction and heat. and that heat eventually caused a spark, and that spark set off a fire, and the fire led to another fire, and there was a big forest fire. So it happens everywhere, and in this age especially, the age of Kali, at the age of coral, it happens over very minor things, like not only do bamboos and bracelets rub together and make noise, but there are quarrels that exist almost everywhere, even within families. As we saw in Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj was born of a father who was very, very evil, and yet he was very good, and there was kind of a Prabhupada called it a disagreement. It was kind of more than a disagreement, because the father tried to kill his son in several ways, but he wasn't successful. But it just goes to show that quarrels exist everywhere, even within families and within societies, within like-minded people. Quarrels arise. They just happen. And this is an example of how the demons, who are generally have a very strong sense of camaraderie or good feelings amongst one another. And we'll see in this thing that we're going to show later on how they always try to take advantage of others. And it's kind of an interesting pastime that happened here with the churning of the ocean of milk. But quarreling does exist everywhere. And one of the things that Prabhupada said was that people that live in the material world sometimes quarrel with each other. And it's just like when I was younger. It doesn't exist so much now, but it does exist. But there's quarrels between countries. And there was a Cold War between the United States and Russia. And Prabhupada said when he was asked about what was going to happen, he said, well, his take on it was that all these very irreligious people would sort of nullify one another. They would wipe each other out, in other words. And that's sort of one of the. I mean, it's kind of a negative thing to say, but a lot of times it happens that I mean, we see this in various countries, and within religious organizations. Sometimes there's quarreling and fighting and disagreement and battles, and sometimes violence exists even within friendly countries. And there's a thing called the United Nations. I think you've probably heard of the United Nations. And although they do some very good things, one of the things that happens with the United Nations is that although they try to unite all the different countries, they sort of have a slogan about unity and diversity. But there's all these different national flags keep increasing year after year. So the gift of this big organization, a lot of money is spent on the United Nations. Each country is supposed to contribute something to make it happen. They're trying to create unity, but as we've seen, there's less and less unity. Recently, there was a referendum in the United Kingdom. Maybe some of you heard about it. And they voted just by a little bit, but they voted to withdraw from the European Economic Community. And and there was a similar thing in former Yugoslavia, where they divided into several different countries like Macedonia and Serbia and places like that. So there's a very strong tendency to divide instead of unify, to divide not only between nations, but everyone is very thinks that their place is the best, and sometimes because they think their place is the best, they have big arguments with other people. They turn into big wars, and there's a lot of enmity that exists in the world. So there's a tendency for people that are stronger, and according to this verse in Bhagavatam, Jivana, the stronger actually eat the weaker, and we can see this in nature all the time. In this kind of rural setting, you can see it especially among the insects. Once I was watching how the magpies prey on the spiders. Magpies are birds, black and white birds. They're kind of like black and white crows, but they prey on the spiders. So one time there was a spider. I witnessed this hanging down from the eaves. Big spider. It's about the size of a human hand. And this bird flew up to it, and I thought it was going to knock it down and eat it, but it flew up to it and flapped its wings a few times. Flew up to it about 3 times, and finally, instead of eating it, it just knocked it down. And what it did later on was train its offspring, the baby magpie, the chick, I think they're called, to chase the spider and catch it and eat it. And so it was actually training its young bird to hunt. And we see this in nature all the time, how the strong take advantage of the weak. And I used to see one insect eat the head of another live insect. It's a very gross and gory thing. And it happens with even human beings. We're prone to kill animals and that are less strong than we are and to eat them. But we try not to. But I mean, as devotees, we try not to. But it happens. It's a very prominent thing. It's a very big industry that animals are killed and eaten. So I'm going to read some more verses and then we'll finish the chapter. By the way, if you have anything you want to say or to ask, just make a note of it, either a mental note or a written note, so we won't forget it. And there's something to show later on. So the next verses, verse 41 through 46 in this chapter are Etasmin antare Vishnu sarvapadya vidishvara yoshi rupam anirdeshyam tadara parama buddham pata Prakshaniyotpala Shamam Sarvayata Asminantare means after this incident. Vishnu, Lord Vishnu. Sarva Upayati, one who knows how to deal with different situations. Ishvara, the supreme controller. Yoshidrupam, the form of the beautiful woman. Anirdesham, no one could ascertain who she was. Dadara, assumed. Parama, speaking to the mind. Her complexion resembled in color a newly grown blackish lotus. And every part of her body was beautifully situated. Her ears were equally decorated with earrings. Her cheeks were very beautiful. Her nose was raised, and her face full of youthful luster. Her large breasts made her waist seem very thin. Attracted by the aroma of her face and body, bumblebees hummed around her, and thus her eyes were restless. Her hair, which was extremely beautiful, was garlanded with malika flowers. Her attractively constructed neck was decorated with a necklace and other ornaments. Her arms were decorated with bangles. Her body was covered with a clean sari, and her breasts seemed like islands in an ocean of beauty. Her legs were decorated with ankle bells. Because of the movements of her eyebrows, she smiled with shyness and glanced over the demons. All the demons were saturated with lusty desires. Every one of them desired to possess her. Then, phrase by phrase, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, who can counteract any unfavorable situation, then assumed the form of an extremely beautiful woman. This incarnation as a woman, Mohini Murti, was most pleasing to the mind. Her complexion resembled, in color, a newly grown blackish lotus, and every part of her body was beautifully situated. Her ears were equally decorated with earrings. Her cheeks were very beautiful. Her nose was raised, and her face full of youthful luster. Her large breasts made her waist seem very thin. Attracted by the aroma of her face and body, bumblebees hummed around her, and thus her eyes were restless. Her hair, which was extremely beautiful, was garlanded with malika flowers. Her attractively constructed neck was decorated with bangles. Her body was covered with a clean sari, and her breasts seemed like islands in an ocean of beauty. Her legs were decorated with ankle bells. Because of the movements of her eyebrows, as she smiled with shyness and glanced over the demons. All the demons were situated with lusty desires, and every one of them desired to possess her. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Because of the Supreme Lord's assuming the form of a beautiful woman to arouse the lusty desires of the demons, description of her complete beauty is given here. So I won't read this long translation again, but just to say that the next chapter almost exclusively deals with this particular incarnation. Krishna manifested himself as a very beautiful and a very attractive woman, so that well, we'll read about it, we'll hear about it next, as classes are given on this chapter, about how the asuras, or the irreligious, the impious, the demonic elements, were very much attracted to her. And they eventually let her be the mediator and decide what should happen, because they were always at odds with the good guys. These are the bad guys, the demons are the bad guys. They were always at odds with the suras, or the devatas, or the demigods. But they agreed to let her to mediate the whole thing. And because she was actually Krishna incarnate, this nectar was to create a sense of to create immortality, and that's why the demons wanted it. And it's a very interesting story about how it all came about. But and it has to do with what we see when we see eclipses of the sun and the moon and all that sort of thing. And the demigods actually got the nectar. But it describes how people are enamored, especially men are enamored by beautiful women to the point where they lose all their sense of, and we'll read about this, where they lose all their sense of reason and common sense, and do it, and they agreed to actually do whatever she asked them to do, because it was Krishna's trick to be irresistibly beautiful and to trick them in this way, which we'll read about. And as Prabhupada says, because of the Supreme Lord assuming the form of a beautiful woman to arouse the lusty desires of the demons, the description, and it's said how they kind of lose their sense of rightness and correctness and obedience and everything reasonable, because they were so much attracted to her irresistible beauty. And on another part of the Bhagavatam, it's stated that even a great demigod like Lord Shiva was attracted. Just he kind of lost all his sense of reasoning and started to chase her, because it's a way to show that Krishna is superior to all the demigods, and even Lord Shiva, who is considered very elevated, and he is very elevated, even he was attracted by the beauty of Krishna incarnating as Mohini Murti. So next week, Wednesday the 13th of July, is the actual day of the date that's celebrated worldwide by the BBC executive body and the committee, International Committee for the 50th anniversary. And I'm going to be speaking on that day, Wednesday, in this temple in the morning, to describe some of the events that took place in the beginning of the movement 50 years ago, exactly to that day. So we'll be seeing some of that. And now, if Krishna is willing, we'll let you see some slides of a sculpture that's existing still, I think, in the Bangkok airport. It has to do with this chapter. Anyway, I don't know if it'll show on the slides, but these figures in the sculpture are life-size, the size of human beings. Just now talking. So this is in the Bangkok airport. Excuse me. This is in the Bangkok airport. Is there anything coming here? Oh, I broke this connection. And very true to you can see by these human beings that are in the foreground, these figures are pretty much life-size. And it's very faithful to the Bhagavatam, because you can see Krishna is appearing on top of the mountain. And I don't know if it shows it here so much, but I think this is the tail end of it. And you can see the ocean being churned as they're having this tug of war going back and forth, and the demons are all depicted as very horrible, ugly, nasty, vicious people, and the good guys are very very saintly looking. But it's also there's a place called Angkor Wat. It's one of the it's supposed to be the biggest Vishnu temple in the world in Kampuchea, formerly Cambodia, where the demons don't look quite so fierce. They're kind of grimacing, but they don't look so vicious. But anyway, this is what it looks like. And if you ever go through the Bangkok airport, you can have a look at it, and it's very faithful.
You see Korma as well?
Pardon?
See Korma?
Is the picture there?
See it above the milk ocean?
Oh yeah, you can see the image of Kurma, the tortoise, just above the milk ocean, between where the snake is, and that's also part of the pastime in Bhagavatam to show that it's very faithful to the text. That's looking at it from another view. It's quite a large piece of sculpture, and it's a very famous thing. It must be famous to have gotten that kind of exposure. So in some time we'll be talking about what are demons and what are irreligious and what are sinful, and it's kind of a language thing that happens because in this age that we're living in, Kali Yuga, it's an age where, especially at the beginning, 1/4 of the people are meant to be religious and pious, and the other 75% are supposed to be impious and meat eaters and whatnot. But it's kind of interesting that sometimes the non-religious people are described as rakshasas or man-eaters, and people who were demonic, really demonic, used to actually eat human beings. But we take the opportunity to go anywhere and everywhere, and even though people manifest their religious qualities and sinful qualities, like eating meat and getting violent and getting extremely intoxicated, because some of those people actually become very devoted and very religious in their lives. So if you're passing through the Bangkok airport, you can see a bit of the Bhagavatam illustrated here. It's a very well done thing, and it's typically, I don't know, it's probably typical of Thai art to have things in gold, and in those days there was a lot of gold around. So anyway, that's all. Yeah. Is there another slide? That's it. So are there any comments or questions? Yes.
Has it been only installed there for a long time?
I don't know, when was it put in? It's been there for several months, I know. I haven't been there myself.
I think it was there for, I traveled through 2008.
In April?
2008.
Oh, 2008, so it's been there quite a long time.
I've been
That's
to
true.
Bangkok Airport pretty much a year or so ago, but it must have been in a different section.
Yeah.
And Maharaj, just one comment. Thank you so much for the class. When you were describing the beauty of Mohini Murthy, it reminded me of a pastime of Srila Prabhupada in the Fisher Mansion before the devotees moved in. Srila Prabhupada went there with some sannyasis and brahmacharis to have a look. And there used to be a very, very large painting of a group of naked ladies. And Prabhupada's standing, it just shows Prabhupada's transcendental position. Prabhupada's standing there looking at the painting like this. And the sannyasis and brahmacharis are embarrassed about it. And Prabhupada's just looking at it, and after a couple of minutes, Prabhupada said, it is very nicely painted.
Any other comments or questions? Yes?
It's just very interesting that in Thailand, the government airport like this would depict a pastime from the 8th canto, but maybe the idea how it came about.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary in my sense. You don't see that anywhere else.
I've got, just open up their website, the airport's website. I can read what it says about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Get the microphone.
I can speak about that.
also the radio and kitchen. And
Okay, so it says, I don't know how to even say the airport name. Does anyone know how to say it? Suvarnabhumi Airport. Because originally, supposedly that name is a Tamil name, which is like South India, I think, somewhere down that part. Okay, so it says if you've been to the airport, you would have seen many beautiful sculptures, including giants that look like the ones at Wat Chang'an and Wat Po. They are tall and frightening. When looking around, you will notice a sculpture that makes you wonder what it is about. It has a godlike statue on both sides, but on one side, the statue looks scarier. They are pulling a serpent, in brackets, the king of Nagas, from both sides. However, the center of the serpent is coiled around something that is set on a turtle with Indra standing on its tops, which I think is wrong, but we guess many people are questioning what it is, what it is for, and what it means. Today we have the answers for you regarding the sculpture. It's called the Churning of the Milk Ocean, and the sculpture that we have seen is called the Churning of the Milk Ocean, or the scene of the Churning of the Milk Ocean. It is believed to be the place that holds the nectar of immortality. Thus, it portrays immortality and stability. Likewise, Suvarnabhumi Airport represents the golden land, resources, prosperity, stability, and eternality. The sculpture has the statue of four-handed Narayan, Vishnu, placed on top of the Mount Madura. It says, 9 gods are on one side and 9 demons on the opposite side are pulling the king of Nagas from both sides. The turtle, Kurma avatar, is the tortoise incarnation of Vishnu, which is the third incarnation form out of the 10 forms according to the scene of the churning of the milk ocean. Kurma avatar uses a shell to be a pivot for the churning stick. And I think that's what it says. Okay. Yeah, that's all it says. That's all the information I've got.
So even where you would least expect it, the Bhagavatam is all pervasive. It just turns out. Yes?
This is a good place to distribute Bhagavatam.
A friend of mine was in Bangkok and produced a version of the Krishna book, not the whole thing, but an excerpt. And the people around there, I think that whole part of the world was called Southeast Asia at one time. Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and all those countries were part of India. And we used to do, I went there a few times, Harinam in a park. And the people were very interested. They were reading books and getting very substantial donations. We were sitting down and having a bit of Harinam Kirtan. In a way, Prabhupada was sort of fighting an uphill battle because he was talking about these things like you see here being not mythology as the Bangkok airport thinks it is. And a lot of Hindu enthusiasts would call this part of mythology, that everything that we read in the Bhagavatam is mythical and fictional. And so it was kind of an uphill battle for Prabhupada to say that it's not fictional, it's actually reality. And it's a very, even difficult to understand esoteric things, like faith, like in the English dictionary, the word religion is described as faith, and Prabhupada said that that's wrong, and that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, and that's the beginning and end of the definition of Krishna, and he said that that's actually wrong. So he was very much going against the grain, against the dictionaries, against the body of knowledge that thinks all this is mythology. And yet, even though it was against the grain, we'll talk about this some more, it was gradually becoming very successful, even though it was not what the ordinary so-called establishment is including the intellectuals of the world, are thinking is reality. He was in the process of converting, in a sense, mythology into reality. And But, on the other hand, even if people take it as things like the 10th canto of the Krishna book, 10th canto of the Bhagavatam or the Krishna book as fantasy, it has some relevance because it's very attractive, just like Mohini Murti is very attractive, even though she's Krishna herself. And some people don't even see it that way. They just see Mohini Murti as a very exquisitely beautiful womanly form. And like people see the painting that was in the Fisher Mansion in the early days. But at the same time, there's a level of appreciation, and even Prabhupada himself appreciated that it was painted with dexterity. It wasn't an ordinary thing. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, all great and very wonderful things are actually emanating from Krishna. And there's an incident that's narrated, I think it's in the Bhagavatam. It's either in the Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and for sure Prabhupada lectures on it. When Sanatana Goswami was in the service of Nawab Hussain Shah, the Mohammedan ruler, then the king of Bengal, this Nawab noticed that Lord Chaitanya was, wherever he went, there were thousands of people following him, and he became a little bit worried that maybe his ascendancy was being threatened by this fear. And what Sanatana Goswami, who wasn't called Sanatana Goswami at that time, said that he was underneath it all a very pious person, obviously. He mentioned to the Nawab that he is actually, he used the word Pir, P-I-R, which is a holy man in Mohammedan language. To have this Pir in your land means that it's a great credit to you. And so he was saying that you should be instead of being worried, you should be proud that a person of this stature is moving within your kingdom. And he was, and then part of this Nawab Hussain Shah's good aspects, even though he was a Mohammedan, he allowed people to execute kirtan in his realm. In fact, when we go on parikram in Mayapur, we go to his samadhi or his tomb, and he's glorified. So it doesn't matter whether he's a Mohammedan or whatever he is, because he was a king. That's a part of Krishna's glory. It's a great and wonderful thing, and Prabhupada mentions that anyone who has a very high position, it's due to Krishna's. It's a part of Krishna's. A spark of Krishna's splendor, as it were. So, any comments or questions? I think we'll have to end here. So next Wednesday of next week, the 13th of July, is the official date of the 50th anniversary of the beginning of ISKCON. So, if you want to hear some of the activities of the early days, I'll be giving a class on that day. So, please come. Hare Krishna. On this Sunday, also, one of the last thing I want to mention is that on Sunday it's going to be celebrated in a public way. It's an open day, and there's a Rath Yatra festival, and many people in the area who have never been here have been invited, and they will come for the first time. So please come and see this wonderful festival. Hare Krishna.